So,
Can I start?
sure, yeah, go ahead and
All
start.
right. I'm going to start by saying that Geode is my favorite character in this book, maybe in Star Wars.
I was gonna say, this book had a fucking pet rock in it.
It's not a pet. He's a man. He's an emotional man. I love Geode. And I'll never stop saying it.
It's an interesting character.
He's the opposite of Chewie. Because Chewie is loud and boisterous and scary, and he's gonna get you, and but he's emotional, and he's.
I mean, how many times
he hugs you, and How
many times do they have somewhere where it's like someone says something and like Geode, has silent acceptance. I'm like, what? All right.
Geode waited patiently, and looking into his eyes, we saw his soul. They would have stuff like that.
Yeah.
I cracked up. I would get. There'd be parts where he's like, well, yeah, Geode's out in the club right now.
Right.
I need to get him to slow down.
Yeah, I know. It's like, when there's a fight, you can't control him.
And I know. I'm sorry that we're going right into it, but we have to. Like, he moves, right?
Supposedly.
Do you think?
No one ever sees it.
But no one ever sees it. That's why it's so cool.
I will say.
It's so charmingly Star Wars.
By the end of the book, there was a moment where I'm like, Geode!
Right? Dude, I was listening to it in my earpiece, outside, and it was an audiobook, and the music fucking swelled, and I was like, what happened? And then the narrator, who I love this narrator's voice so much.
Sure.
He was like, it was Geode. And I was like, and the music swelled, and I was like, motherfucker, that's brilliant. Good job, Claudia Gray.
Well, sure, right?
You made me be like, of course it's him. Who else could it be?
Well, they started off too, and you have him in the cockpit, and he's like the navigator, right?
Was there a moment where you're like, they're fucking with the Jedi, right?
That's literally what I thought.
It's like, hey, do you think that we can get the Jedi to think this rock is like a real thing, and they would just move it? Like,
yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was like they're lying,
Yeah.
right? Like, is this just a lie or what? Like, did they turn on the navigation? They're like, oh, thanks, Geode. I don't know. But there's a part where like Reith is like doing something, looking away, and he looks up, whatever, and Geode's just there. He's like, oh, hey, and he starts talking to him like, should I talk to this rock? Like.
It's so, what I honestly thought of? It's so Doctor Who in the best way. Because it's kind of the weeping angel in a way, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like, you never see him move, but he definitely does.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's a good way to look at it, I suppose,
Yeah.
right? Like, there's a moment where it's like, a shadow moves. It's like, was that Geode? It's like, I guess. I don't know. What else would it have been?
And I think I got too deep into trying to figure out, okay, there's the joke. And then there's what's actually happening. And I'm thinking like, okay, so Geode as a rock, you know what? He's kind of like a perfect example of what this book is about, which is ignorance. You don't understand something, but you think you do. That's prevalent throughout the entire book.
I see what you mean.
Right? I mean, we'll talk about it when it comes to the Jedi. We'll talk about it when it comes to this space station. We'll talk about it when it comes to how some of the characters' motivations. But Geode is, like, the characters come and they look and they're like, okay, that's weird. I'll figure that out. And then it becomes to the point where they don't have to figure it out. They have to understand.
Sure.
And I was going deep. I was like, okay, so Geode must be a sentient rock that maybe he exists in, like, the fourth dimension. And he is moving, but your mind can't perceive it. Like, imagine him.
Okay.
Imagine him walking. He's floating away from us through Coruscant. You can't perceive him moving, but every once in a while you'll blink and he's further away. Like, I was like, okay, maybe that makes sense, and I'm like, no. And then I'm like, well, hyperspace and real space, that's a distinction, especially in the High Republic. Maybe there's some type of like hyperspace thing going on where Geo can like move fourth dimensionally through hyperspace, but you can't perceive it because you're a third dimensional being.
I mean, it could be possible. The only thing with that is like when you have like you see the shadows move, it's like, well, so is he really moving?
Sure. Yeah.
Why don't you hear anything? Should they not hear like,
I don't know. Does he float?
like I don't know.
Can he fly?
It's so quiet and it just happens, and I'm like, all right. By the end of it, I was just like, all right, there's a rock, and he moves
and he's the most emotional, supportive being on the ship.
Yeah, and like once he, he's really shy, but once he gets to know you, I'm like, okay. But no, yeah, it was interesting, and I really enjoyed. I don't know. I don't want to say his arc, but the journey he has. I enjoyed it. You know what I mean?
I get you.
So no, I thought that was fun. The arc of this rock.
I don't think he works as well without Leox and Affy, to be like, it's the most normal thing in the world that this is happening.
Yeah, they don't bat an eye at it, right?
Yeah.
So, like, that's why, too, like, in the very beginning, I'm like, is this real?
Yeah.
Like, they're so, like, straight-faced about this, it almost feels like it could be a joke.
Yeah.
And then eventually I'm just like, I guess it's not a joke.
Sure.
I don't know what else turned on all the lights and, started the navigation computer or whatever. And
now, when the High Republic launched and this book was coming out, I remember there being, like, stories of, like, there's a character in here, it's a rock, it's dumb.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I remember that being, like, prevalent.
I never heard about that.
In
That's
Star
fun.
Wars, in the Star Wars fandom. So whenever
Of course.
I got to that point, I was like, oh, okay, this must be that thing that people hated. And I think maybe just the expectation of people not liking it or that being, like, a headline that I had seen made me be like, okay. And then I saw what they were doing with it, made me like love it more.
Sure.
So maybe I'm
Your
biased
reverse
the wrong
bias.
way. Yeah, the reverse bias. But
I get you.
oh my god,
I think it's done fairly well. And like I
so.
said, by the end of it, I was like, Geode, yes, yes, Geode. I was like happy, and I'm like, yeah.
I know.
The only thing that I wanted to like, do we actually get to like see? Do we get to see him move or anything, or talk, or anything?
I
want
wanted to be like, what's Yoda's species? I wanted to be like that.
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
But no, I wasn't sure if I was gonna like it or not by the end. I didn't know there was a bunch of like drama about.
I just remember. I don't know how long ago.
I mean,
I remember people being like, "This is dumb. Look at this," and I was like, "Okay, yeah,
that's
sure."
Star Wars, right?
I mean,
here's something new. I hate it.
Back in the old Star Wars Legends, there was like a fucking
glove
Triceratops.
Oh.
That was a Jedi.
I didn't say the glove.
Yeah,
the Darth Vader
There was
glove
the glove of
corrupts
Darth Vader.
and makes everything evil or whatever, right?
Oh yeah. Oh man, I have an idea for a segment in a future Badonkagong, which is me just telling you, here are three things. You gotta pick which one I made up, and it's just old shit from the EU.
There's probably some ridiculous things in there, right?
That would be fun. I've already burned Glove of Darth Vader and some other stuff, but there's some great stuff out there.
But no, yeah, I was. It was an interesting character. I don't know a lot about him still.
Yeah.
But by the end of it, like I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I like this. I will say, like, I think my favorite character, and it might have been because of what I did in my head, I think was Captain Leox.
Leox Giassi.
I think he was my favorite.
Me too.
It might have been because of the way it was being read from the voice actor, the audiobook guy, right?
The narrator, yeah.
I had a picture of Woody Harrelson in my head, and I'm just like, if Tobias Beckett wasn't a thing, and they made this into a movie, a TV show, I want Woody Harrelson to be this. And then I was as far as like, you know what? Screw it. This is like, what, hundreds of years before?
Yeah.
He's an ancestor, Tobias Beckett. That's who this guy is now, you know?
Huh.
And it was just the way it was read, the way he kind of came off talking about different things, just kind of had a very like, it's like Zombieland, right? Whatever state that guy's named for, right? There's like Wyoming and Colorado, whatever. It felt like Woody Harrelson from like that movie, maybe like a little bit carefree, doing what he wants, and it was just I don't know. I think he became my favorite character.
He had my favorite. Like he has, Tobias Beckett does this too, right? Like with his sayings, like. He had a saying on there. I'm trying to see if I wrote it down, if I can just remember what it was. But he was like, "Oh, he's madder than a Grindelwald at noon." And a Grindelwald is Lady Proxima from Solo, where it's like the light hits her, like, ah!
Yeah, right. So at noon he's gonna be mad.
Yeah, I really liked that one. But yeah, the voice actor I thought did a great job. And I mean, spoilers for the end of the book when he did Marchion Rowe at the end. I don't know if you read it. Yeah. I was like, holy shit, he sounds like the other guy.
Yeah, you're talking about the narrator.
Yeah, the narrator.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, the narrator.
Yeah. I was like,
it was so good.
Leox did what?
No. When the narrator did, I liked his voices. I mean, his women felt a little too close together.
When we did the other High Republic book, did you listen to that one or did you read
I
that
went back and listened to it.
Because I felt like
I read the whole thing and then I did it again.
When he did that, I was like, you know what? I feel like that matches really well with the last audiobook that I listened to with Marchion. So I thought that was really good too. No, I liked Leox. Leox. I want to put an R in there all the time. I don't know why. So I'm trying to. I also kept wanting to say Reef and not Wreath. Right. Yeah. So, but with Leox, I really liked when he was talking about his like spice, whatever that he had in there and stuff. And it's like, well, we got this stuff
here.
I
told you it was medicinal.
It's medicinal. What do you mean? Nothing illegal. It's fine. Yeah. And then by the end, it's like, I told you it was medicinal. And I was like, I really enjoy this character. So much fun.
we'll get into it, but in terms of like what Jedi should or shouldn't be, and how do you deal with feelings, right? Like that's the hardest thing about being a Jedi is that the Jedi way teach you to suppress your feelings because that's for people that can live a normal life. You have a responsibility, and feelings are dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Leox, he seems asexual, so he doesn't really deal with all the baggage that comes with being a sexual being, right? Because he says like, it's not for me. I had fun, but I don't really care. He also has this mindset of he never complains about the bad shit that happens. He only appreciates the good, which, I know that toxic positivity is a thing, but the way that he confronts things, I feel like, man, that would benefit a Jedi so much.
Sure.
Because I love Reeth. Reeth is one of my favorite new Jedi in the High Republic. Just because I love the idea that he's not adventure, excitement. We have so many examples of people that are, Jedi that are wanting to go out there and be heroes, but he's a scholar. He's a
Dez in this one, right? And kind of has much more of an adventure outlook that he wants to do, right? In the beginning, at least.
Yeah, definitely. So. But I love that Reeth is this learner. Like he's always, he's in a deadly situation at one point in this book, and the first thing he thinks is like, "Oh, that's interesting. I need to write that down." I'm like, "Motherfucker, you're gonna die!
Don't die right now." Sure.
Yeah.
But then also, in moments when it gets, there's a moment towards the end where they're all trying to get back to the ship, and then they turn and he's just gone.
Yeah.
And and then you cut to him, and he's like, I know it's dangerous, but we aren't going to get out of here. I have to do this. And they are busy, getting these guys back to the ship, doing this stuff here. And it's like, sure, he's not adventurous. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want the danger. He wants to learn and study, but he's also a Jedi, and he wants to protect people, And that's one of the big reasons why he wants to go back, too. And I like that, too, with Reeth, where, this book was interesting because I thought that there's little elements with it being October. I've been on a horror kick. There's little elements of some scary kind of moments stuff, And I'm like, well, that's cool. It might not be. I haven't read Death Troopers, so it might not be Death Trooper zombie stuff, but it's still okay, that's not what I expected. Especially it's Into the Dark. So I'm like, there's some different meanings with Into the Dark, and I thought that was cool. But no, it's neat to have Reeth kind of go from I'm going here. I'm going to do this. Mm-hmm. I have my master, which also he gets back and he finds
Jorah Molly.
Jorah Molly, which was in the previous book that we did, right?
Unfortunately, she died during the attack on the Nihil.
Yeah. So having those moments, but they travel, they get back to Coruscant, but then still he's like, I need to go back. I messed stuff up, and I need to fix this and help everybody, right? Mm-hmm. And I really liked in this book how everybody who had went to that space station all wanted to go back for different reasons, but they all come back together and help each other to do all the stuff that they wanted to do when they get back there, right?
And it's all against the things that they're supposed to do, right?
Sure.
The Jedi say no, the bind...
It's against, but they didn't forbid it.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Sure, exactly. They all, have a responsibility that they could easily say, hey, that's not my responsibility.
Sure, yeah.
But they're like, no, we gotta do this. I love when Jedi make mistakes. I love when Jedi realize just how screwed up the Order is. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about this as we get into the next discussion. But it's also a little necessary too. I think the characters were probably, for me, maybe because there was less of them, but a little stronger in this book than in the previous High Republic. But honestly, I think it's just because the previous High Republic, I loved it, and I loved the world building, but it was overwhelming with new characters. I was keeping track of. This was relatively easier.
It was more of we end up creating a Rebels crew, and we go on an adventure, and we stick with those people, right? Mm-hmm. You have a couple other people that you kind of meet here and there, which I feel they're the background characters of in episode 1, you see the council. Sure. They're not the main characters, but they show up, and you talk with them and stuff, and you go on somewhere else. But for the most part, you're with, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Padme. You're with those people there. And but one thing I like the way you put it about ignorance, right? Yes. With this, I think that reflects really well too with the way the book's laid out. Of we are going on this mission, we end up at the station, we come back to Coruscant. And here's where we realize what we believed and thought was kind of true all really shifts and changes for every character
For
pretty
everybody.
much, like everyone's
Yeah.
like, man, I thought that these idols did this stuff, and like I thought that my mom did this,
Yeah.
and like everyone had their own beliefs when they were there, and they come back and they start to realize I didn't understand what I thought I was, and I thought I was right, and I need to fix this.
Yeah.
And then they start trying to set the course right again, and
Yeah.
like I didn't think about the ignorance kind of side of things, but like it really reflects on everybody with
It does.
with their journey back and forth between
Yeah,
them.
I mean, it's why this was. I had no idea. This is a youth novel.
I thought
This
it
is a
might have
young adult
been
novel.
when I saw the size of like the way
Yeah.
the book was shaped. It
Sure.
wasn't shaped like most of the other
Yeah.
ones. It was a little smaller, but I thought it was really good.
But I think it's important, especially to point out that it is meant for maybe a slightly younger viewer base. But there comes a time in everybody's life where you kind of realize like, oh, people are just trying to figure this shit out. Like when you're a kid, you're a teenager, and you're like, okay, there is the way things are, and that's the way they are, and I need to conform to the way they are, right? Like, this is what laws are like. This is what taxes are like. This is what life is like. And then you get to a certain point in your life where, like, oh, no, that's just some fucking guy just said that one day, you know? That doesn't mean that's what it is. So how do I, so I need to think about that differently a little bit, right? I feel like everybody in this book does that to a certain extent. They all kind of be like, they'll all be like, well, this is what the Jedi have always done, but the Force is telling me that's not the way.
Yeah.
Right? And what are the Jedi? The Jedi are meant to be instruments of the Force. They're meant to empty themselves out so the Force can move through them. But if the Jedi code is keeping them from moving the way the Force wants them to, then what is the point?
Sure.
No.
And
what do they have wrong, and what do others have right? I love the idea that the ancient Sith stopped this plague from destroying the galaxy. You know, the Sith did good.
Yeah. It's not very often that
their
happens, right?
idols are like, well, this is a slave that we enslave, you know, but still.
Well, like, you can't rule the galaxy if something destroys it all,
Exactly.
right?
You're
Or
not a
takes
good
it over
ruler,
or whatever.
yeah.
So, no,
Like,
you really got to do.
If we're going to lose freedom, we got to have security.
Yeah, right? No, I mean, the thing you're talking about with that and everything, like, Ula? Or Orla?
Orla Rennie, yes.
Yeah. Like, what you're talking about there, I think, like, some of the stuff we get from her story and stuff, like, reflects that really well, where she's talking about, like, do I listen to the council? Do I listen to the Force? And if they contradict each other, what am I supposed to do there?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's an interesting, like, topic there, because, like, the Jedi are working with the Force, and the Force guides them and everything. But what happens when one Jedi is being guided by the Force, and the council's like, no, don't do this? Yeah. Which one do you listen to? And that's a very interesting
It is
discussion
interesting, and apparently there's an answer to that, which is become a way seeker.
A way seeker.
Yeah, they say, like, she's wanting to become a way seeker, which is operating independently of the Jedi Council. It's just you go out and you're a Ronin, you're a wandering Jedi, right? You might settle planetary disputes on your own. You might do something, but you don't have to go back and report. You don't have to go back and get advice. You just you're granted a ship and a mandate, and you go. Which I think is pretty cool. A cool idea. There's a bunch of really cool ideas that I don't know if they're in other books or not, but I really like that, and I like the idea of
what's the Bashir meditation or something like that?
The Bearish Vow.
Bearish Vow, yeah, where they go and like meditate for.
It's what Dez ends up doing. You know, I really thought that, with Reith losing his master, and again, there's that idea of like, well, Reith is like, well, the Jedi will take care of me. I'll just wait until they summon me and give me a new master and tell me what to do. And the Jedi are like, what do you want to do?
Yeah, you tell us.
He's like, oh, you want me to decide? It's like, yeah, that's the point. You need to decide what you do. Like, you can only judge and learn if you make choices.
Oh, sure.
I really thought that after everything they had gone through, Dez might have taken him as his Padawan. But then I was like, no, Dez is so broken. I underestimated how broken Dez was.
The talk they had about him being like there's a moment here where, I mean, we're going into spoilers of the book, so anyway, there's the talk about him being dead, and then you find out like, oh, he's not. He's still here. Yeah. But him talking about I could have like the dark side taking me if they didn't kill me. Like my connection to the Force is so just broken, messed up, like here and there. Like I need to go and focus on this. So like that idea of like their the vow, the meditation thing for like they described it as like a year to decades that they spend like just trying to refocus and find the Force and everything. And I was like, damn, he's committed for this and what he wants to find and stuff. And I think that's part of too with like Reith, where it's like he should decide, like he needs to find what he believes in, what he wants to do, so that it means more to him too. Not just like, well, the council told you to do this, so go do that. It's like, well, I don't want adventure, I want to study, or I don't want this, I want that. So like he needs to find what he is after. And I like that idea.
No,
Because
it was
I don't
really
feel like
cool.
you get that a lot, especially in the newer, like the movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I like with the High Republic is like seeing what are Jedi. In my mind, the idea should be like what were Jedi
Yeah.
before they were being slowly taken over and clouded by the dark side and everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, the High Republic is aptly named because you have Chancellor So's like "We are the Republic." And,
Yeah.
like unless there's some type of like in-game crazy shit going on, like it's a kind of place where I'm like, man, that would be cool to live in.
Yeah.
To have a leader that you're like, I really believe in this person and like their great works and like when the Republic works and the Jedi serve the Republic, that's good, When the Republic isn't, when it's fat and corrupt and it's taking and it's on the precipice because the Sith have been doing this for 1,000 years, then the Jedi are like, well, we serve the Republic, right? It's like, yeah, but should you? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And we have characters like Comac, Vitus, right? Who is starting to have his doubts, and I feel like that's really like, okay, yeah, 200 years later, he is so right.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what route are we going and what are the Jedi supposed to be and
Yeah.
what shouldn't we be?
One thing about the book that I thought, there was two things where I'm like, I don't know if I like this. One is this system that is in has like a solar flares and its sun is going crazy, and then that's kind of just dropped. And then later in the book, they're like, hey, there's a solar flare coming, we're going to get the fuck out of here. And then like they just never talk about it again.
Okay. So okay.
Yeah.
I was later in the book and stuff, they were talking about, all right, well, what do we got to do? It's like, they're going to take over this station.
Yeah.
It's like, well, Leox just said that there's a solar flare coming, and even the other side of the space station, they wouldn't be safe. It would kill everybody, right?
Sure.
So I was like, oh, well, don't put up the shields or whatever that Reith was going to do. Don't do that, and let that solar flare just
let
kill
that
everybody
fucker
here,
burn,
right?
Man.
But no, you're right, because at one point, like I was like, that's what we're going to do, right? That's got to be where we're going. And then, I don't think it was really brought up again.
Yeah,
and
so I think you could have just cut that if you wanted to.
Yeah, like they were putting like a timer on it, but then they never like. I imagine it being more of like by the end escaping the Death Star explosion, right? Like hurry up and get out of here, and they're all flying away. The explosion's happening. They're trying to get out of there, right?
Sure.
Or the in Clone Wars when the Malevolence shows up, right, and shoots its ion blast, and you're like, oh shit, get out of here, hurry!
Yeah.
Like I imagined it being more like that, but then it just kind of like vanished, I think, and I don't know why, or if we affected it. Maybe I missed something.
It was the part where I was like, man, that's gonna be some shit when that goes down. I'm just kind of waiting for it to happen, and then I finished the book. I was like, where's the solar flare?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Reith went and like changed shields at one point or whatever, but
I thought that it would be more of like there's the Nihil, there's the Dren gear.
Yeah.
And then, like,
gear.
we release them, let them fight each other, get the hell out, and let the solar flare kill them all. Or,
I love Reith's solution though. Just turn on the gravity, let them all go out into space.
Yeah.
It
seemed to work.
Yeah, I love the idea too that like this kid, which I thought was adorable. He's so beat up that he cut off that slaver's hand or whatever. Like, oh man, it's just funny in a meta way because Star Wars, every single Star Wars thing, they're always cutting off arms and hands.
They are.
No one gives a
Limbs
shit.
get cut off all the time.
No one cares. But like he's like, oh man, oh God, Scoob, that he cut off someone's hand. And then later in the book, he's like, you know what? These people entered into a fight in order to kill, innocents or whatever. Fuck them. He just hits the button and they all go flying out the airlock.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is not just an arm.
No, right? And like if they were, that's why I was like, well, I figured everyone's gonna die. We can't have these Dren gear guys running around. What'd you think about these like plant, like poison?
Yeah.
Creatures.
Well, as an old EU fan, I was kind of instantly reminded of the Yuuzhan Vong. In terms of like organic, but it's interesting. They are of the dark side, even to the point where even the Sith were like, "Nah, we gotta stop this." I was so confused for a second though, because when they got to that, like I wanted to explore that planet that is very Mass Effect, the whole like relay situation thing
where
they had.
They have like a space station and it's around a planet or whatever.
Yeah.
I did when I was like looking at different things. There's an image of that, and it's based on like a comic from like a Kylo Ren comic.
Oh, okay.
And like I've never read it or anything,
Gotcha.
but it's tied to that. So I saw like a picture that looked kind of cool of like a planet with like this metal space station, like kind of rings around it and stuff and connected, and it looked kind of cool.
Yeah, I when I was trying to do a little bit of research into some of the stuff, like the Amaxines, which created the space station, apparently they were mentioned before in another Claudia Gray thing, Bloodline.
Oh, okay.
So maybe that's something that we'll catch up on at some other point too. But it was just funny, like I kind of had to like do a double take when they were like, "I want some meat," you know. I'm like, "What?" And then they had like blasters, like on that planet. They said they have like really old blasters. It just made me think of like Ints.
Okay.
But
with
you know,
blasters
like
and
whenever
stuff?
they come in and fuck up Saruman's
Just
place,
throwing
and
rocks and shit.
It's like, oh no, that's what they are. But they're bad. They're like angry all the time. Like they are hasty.
I did think about the Yuzhang Vong because of it being like an organic living kind of idea and having force, but like I don't know. It was an interesting character. I'm like, I wonder if we're done with these. I wonder if they can ever show up again. You know, like
Sure.
like that planet. Like there was more on the planet, right?
Yeah,
By
there
the
were
end
more
of
on
this?
the planet.
So like they're just stuck down there or something. Or
I think so. It
is that how
seems
it
like
ended?
they don't have like they were like conquerors or whatever, but they don't seem to have like space
travel. So they were using the pods of this space
They
station
were using
to get
the
back and forth.
Maxines, yeah.
Yeah, which I did enjoy when Wreath was like, he rode the pod up and they rode the other pod up and then he like force pushed it back.
Yeah.
And then like the same thing that like they thought killed Dez actually killed all them.
Yeah,
and
I know.
It's like,
Yeah, the coaxium helix or whatever that thing was.
I was like, that's really cool. I'm glad that
man,
he
when
was there.
Dez died, like, did you buy it?
I was like, wait, what just happened? And I like rewound again.
Yeah.
I'm like, the hell? What? Okay, he's just dead?
He's vaporized.
I'm like, all right. Okay.
Like when it first happened, I'm like, no. Something else is happening. There's this dark side thing. He's gonna get corrupted, and we're gonna have a fight. And yes, that happened. But
sure.
Like once we got to Coruscant, and they were talking about it, I'm like, oh fuck, he died. That sucks.
Yeah.
Like when Wreath was talking about, I lost my master and my big brother in a way.
Sure. Yeah.
I did like the thing they had about former Padawans of your current master will kind of like they're like siblings in a way. Like they're a little closer to you. They'll come and they'll hang out and it's like a little tiny family that
Sure.
At one point in the book, one of the characters is like, that's kind of fucked up that they like were not supposed to care.
Yeah.
You know, because another part of this story that at first I was like, why are we doing this? Which was the 25 years ago story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
With Comac and Orla as Padawans. And he loses his master pretty early in that. And I, as it was going on, I'm like, this is an okay story, I suppose, but why? And then when it is revealed that he will take up Wreath as his Padawan, at the end of the book, and he says that amazing line where he's like, I think I might learn more about the Force
from you
than you will learn from me. I was like, oh, yeah, because he had that line about, like, I told my master every day, like, be careful, And his master was like, I'm fine. He's always concerned about other people, but he was a little more risky with himself. And that got his master, the one time I didn't say anything, that got my master killed. I'm like, oh, that would make for a really cool idea in that learn and mentor both ways.
Yeah.
Right?
I need to learn from you as much as you learn from me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know everything, right? It's kind of what we talked about, like, when you're assuming, like, oh, people know. I'm a little kid. My parents know what's going on. Everyone knows, and I just need to learn, and eventually I'll know, too. And a lot of it's like, well, no, they're always learning, too. They don't know everything. And I can learn from you, and you can learn from me kind of idea. So, no, I like that.
Yeah, and it's a theme, like that specific master and apprentice thing that is incredibly good that we read it this week, and then also, Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Has very, very similar themes. So
sure.
Yeah. What else though? The Dringer, you were asking me about them.
Yeah.
I thought they were a really cool, if not a slightly one-dimensional bad guy, in that they are just another warrior species, but it's cool that they're plants and we don't understand them. Also, they got a rock,
Well, yeah, but I like that there was like this. I don't know what best way to describe it. It's like their vines, it's their biome. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like keeps growing and expanding and like taking over more and more, and like the ship gets caught in it too. And it's like these grew in minutes.
Exactly.
And I was like, that's an interesting thing. It's not just these things are scary, but they also just keep creeping out, and they get more, and they trap you, and
because it's that ignorance thing again, right? Like even as they're fighting them, they see them as individuals, but they don't see the vines, right? They are literally missing the forest for the trees.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the Drengers seem to be, we don't understand what their culture is like, and they do speak to each other, but it's very much like, Tolkien again, Fanghorn Forest, when they walk into there and they're like, the trees are talking to each other and they're angry, It kind of reminded me of that. So whenever we were going through this biome that was vines and trees, I thought of Fanghorn Forest a lot.
Sure. Okay.
and
Yeah.
they want meat.
Meat.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think they were interesting. I do like their like
They also felt Doctor Who to me as well.
Doctor Who.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like their like kind of slowly taking control of Dez and stuff, and
Yeah.
him having to like try to fight out of it, and like Reith is like talking about their master and stuff. And
That
trying
was
to,
my
like,
favorite lightsaber fight.
That their fight right
I
there.
loved that lightsaber fight. I mean, when you read about a lightsaber fight, I gotta admit, it's not the most exciting thing.
Not usually,
You
right?
know? Yeah.
The
I mean,
thing I like the
lightsabers are-
best
yeah,
about
go
the
ahead.
books is the understanding internally of
Yeah.
using the Force and stuff.
Mhm.
I think is done really well, and I don't get that from the movies.
Agreed.
But the lightsaber fights typically are better in the
Yeah.
movies. You know, what I
And
mean?
it was fun to hear that about the dark side in this book.
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
Because I especially loved there was one line about what they felt, this dark side presence. It was like when you're in a room by yourself and someone just came in the door that was locked behind you.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's a really cool way of putting, like, the dark side is like a presence that you can't shake.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's really cool.
Oh shit.
Yeah. What was I just talking about, though?
We were saying about the Dren gear, and then we
Yeah.
were talking about the lightsaber fight.
The lightsaber
Yeah.
fight. Yes.
Tell us
I
how
lo-
you like the lightsaber.
I
fight.
love this lightsaber fight because to me it was just it's everything you need in a good choreographed fight to tell a story, right?
So,
Reith is like he talks about I'm not a fighter, I'm a scholar.
Sure.
But I've trained just like everybody else, and he goes into the forms, right? Whereas Dez, we know, is just the more adventurous thrill-seeking Jedi. We know that he's going to be the better lightsaber fighter, but he's lost everything that makes him a Jedi. He just has muscle memory left, right? So I would relish the idea of choreographing a fight like that where you have one person who is out of control but has muscle memory, right? And the other who is in control but doesn't have the best muscle, and it's very emotional because the way that he breaks it is to their common master, right? They both like it's the only way he can say is like Master Jorah, and Reith has some really great moments where he's thinking of Master Jorah and like relishes in the thought that through the cosmic force, I hope she's proud of me right now.
Sure.
Not like kind of just like my parent is dead and I hope they're proud. It's like no, he's thinking like she could be right here.
Sure.
being proud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cosmic force. That's like there's a lot of things they don't understand about it, and a lot of stuff like even later on that they don't understand about the cosmic force. So, no, I like that idea too. Like I want to have a better understanding. I want to see more about cosmic force
too.
and the living force, the cosmic force, all that kind of stuff. And
I would
just,
love to get that in like an Obi-Wan season 2.
sure, yeah.
With
Or
just,
like,
Dude,
imagine if they did like a Tales of the Jedi, but it's actually like Qui-Gon after he died.
whoa, yeah.
Is that a good idea? I don't know.
That's a great idea.
Damn. I don't know how you do that exactly, but I think that'd be cool to like get a better understanding. Like this is about a Jedi in the Force, like that could be cool.
Just like 5,000 story ideas hit me all at once. That could be such a cool point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think like with what you got out of this, like the way you picture in your head, like
Yeah.
I could make this lightsaber fight because the book
yeah.
described it so well. I understand
Of
exactly
all
what's
the
happening.
lightsaber fights of the High Republic, this one was the most cinematic to me. It was the most emotional to me. It was I could just kind of like see it in my head. And it was exciting, and I really did. There was a point where I wanted to like call you and be like, "Hey, let's choreograph this.
Let's go make
we
this
gotta find
fight."
some actors. We gotta go do it. We'll do like little High Republic short films or something, because that's how much I was really into the idea. And just think of the setting, right?
With
like not only
Dringer in
yeah,
the
they have
background and
fucking
shit.
evil trees with guns, everywhere. Like,
That'd be crazy.
That would be so crazy.
It's
And,
definitely a fun setting.
and I just love the idea of Dez, like he's hitting with all of his might and his strength, but because he's crazed, he's more wild, he's not as disciplined, but he is the more disciplined of the two. So there's just a really cool like power scaling thing that happens there that I think that could translate really well into certain choreography movements and showing strength versus discipline, but that discipline only goes so far. Dez has that moment where he's like, I can defend,
Yeah.
but not forever.
No, yeah. I'm only gonna be able to hold him off for so long.
So like, what I need to do is give him the most emotional uppercut I can. Bam, Master Jorah,
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was really good.
Sure. No, I like that too. And then that fed into like them escaping,
Yeah.
and then the moment we talked about earlier, where like everyone gets disintegrated and stuff too. And
Yep.
it's like, well, good. Now they can't get back here. We took care of the pods. They're here, destroyed. We're good.
Yeah. I imagine we'll see them again.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think like I think that's the idea, right? You set up like, here's these guys. Maybe we'll see them again in the future at some point. Here's Dez. He could be gone for a year. He's gone for 10 years. Like, we don't really know, but maybe he'll show up again at some point. So, like, I think the High Republic, both these books so far, I think have done a good job of setting up some stuff. And we didn't even talk about how, like, this takes place during the same time as the previous book, Light of the Jedi, with the Legacy Run. And, like, they are, like, dodging parts of the Legacy Run and stuff, right? Like, scanners say it's the Legacy Run. It's like, what?
Yep.
And I did like they've done a so far the consistency for like when hyperspace like screws up, it always turns like that red,
the red color,
kind of like in Rebels and that kind of stuff, which I think we talked about during that. But so far the consistency with that, I'm like, I hope we learn more about it with the Nihil and their weird jumping that they can do and stuff with the paths and everything. And I want to understand hyperspace and more of how that works too, because that's another thing where it's just kind of it happens. But I don't know why it happens, you know? And then
the High Republic has put a lot of effort into telling us, like, hey, this is how it always is, and now it's different. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that's how it always was.
Yeah, right?
You know?
But, like, the sequel trilogy kind of touched on a little bit of that with, like, their hyperspace jumping thing, right?
Yeah, the skipping.
The skipping, yeah. Like, it's like, oh, well, that's a thing you can do? It's like, yeah, it is. You just didn't know, huh? So I'm wondering if, like, the two things will kind of, like, connect and that we just didn't know maybe or something. Like, is that part of, like, the path kind of hyperspace things or something, you know? But
yeah, I mean, with, you know, the ending of this book was very rewarding because it halfway through reading it, wasn't even really thinking about the rest of the other book. I was just enjoying this. Like, this kind of had like almost like a video game story to me where it's like one central level that you learn new parts and you go down here and there's a new path.
Yeah.
And then you leave and you come back and everything's different. So I like that part of the book, but it was really rewarding when you got to the end of it. And it's like, oh, Skier! And here's all these characters from the first book, like, together. And Starlight Beacon, once again, is activated.
Yeah.
So that was a cool moment. And now I'm just like, fucking, let's get on this beacon and do shit.
It does kind of remind me a little bit of, like when we played, like, Man of Medan or something like that, right? Like, those kind of where you're following this person and you everyone goes to the same place. But then, like, all right, we're over here, and this is happening. Yeah. And then, like, oh, shit, what's next? And then, we're jumping over here to this guy now. Now we're going to follow them over here. And then we jump back and see where they're at. And I enjoyed, and like you said, there was a lot of characters and a lot of things going on in the Light of the Jedi. And that book, too, was also very, like, here's this part. Yeah. It's very important. And now that's done, and now we're at, like, this part, right? Yeah. And this just kind of, like, is much smaller scale in a way.
It is.
And I really enjoyed that where it felt a little more personal to these characters where, like, before I'm like, okay, there's this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy. Okay, these ones died and these ones didn't. And there's a lot to try to remember. And I'm trying to do my best. I know Star Wars over a course of years and years and years. So trying to make sure I remember, like, okay, it was Orla, Leox, like trying to make sure I had these guys every time, you know, so.
I know. I don't want to ever be a moment where I turn the page and then Comac Vitus is standing there, and I don't want to ever be like,
who's that?
Am I supposed to know that guy?
Yeah, right.
You know?
Sure. And I look forward to, like, the other books where it's like Comac. Comac, I remember him. Shit. What's gonna happen now? So, no, I've enjoyed the connection that this had with, like, the other book, but on a smaller scale. Like, it's still connected to, like, this happened because of that happening. Yeah. But here's where these people were instead because of that, you know? Yeah. And I enjoy that a lot.
It's a cool idea to literally just take Star Wars' world and just reset everything and being like, okay, you know Star Wars? I'm like, yeah. He's like, all right, now imagine if you know nothing about it. I'm like, okay. It's like, all right, start reading.
Right, yeah. I'm starting as like a kid with no knowledge of anything now.
Yeah. Okay. And you're kind of like, okay, I get that. Like,
they said Yoda.
Yeah. Where the fuck is he? They keep talking about him, you know? That was a cool thing, too, that I noticed is that whenever they were talking about trying to cleanse the idols that they thought were there to what was the thing that, like, eventually you find out they're actually keeping the Dringer down.
Yeah, well, they get to the station and there's a darkness here.
Yeah, and they're having
then they like
visions.
These are the darkness. We have to get rid of these, take these somewhere else so that they're safe and whatnot. And there's like, oh, we've released. Yeah, they were holding it at bay, and now we've released the darkness. We misunderstood how these idols worked.
But they mentioned like
I did like that Comac was a like an archaeological Jedi.
He's like a folklorist and
I thought that kind of.
Yeah, a scholar and folklorist.
Like I liked, like he's like, I know, and like at one point, Orla and Wreath are both like, all right, we're gonna have to try to do this again. It's like, but he's not here. It's like, we're gonna have to do our best.
Sure.
And I like it's like, I've learned what I can in this moment from him.
Yeah.
So it's cool to just see different aspects. It's like when Quinlan shows up and you're like, oh man, that's a neat force power, and he can look at the history of this item
like
and
a
stuff
Jedi
and do these
detective.
things. And I just like seeing like Jedi doing different things. And the High Republic's a great spot to be like, not all Jedi are supposed to be. Now you're a general and you go fight in an army. It's like, you're doing this, you're doing that. You're a scholar. You're a peacekeeper. I mean, they're all peacekeepers, I guess, in the long run of things. But like versus like a scholar or someone who's like monitoring Starlight Beacon. You know, I just like seeing Jedi doing different types of tasks.
The frontier, the core, that type of thing.
Yeah,
I did like when they mentioned Yoda in this, that they were like, well, if he were here during this idol cleansing, he'd probably be the one leading it. And I'm like, oh, interesting. That means that Yoda, when he's on Dagobah and he is near the Cave of Evil, might actively be doing something to use it to mask his presence or keep that thing at bay, whatever. But no, he has that, they called it like Jedi Arcana knowledge.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a word I don't really associate with the Jedi.
And maybe that works well with like, when you get to Rebels and they're on Lothal inside their temple.
Yeah.
Like, Yoda communicates to them through that. And is that part of that reasoning too? Is it just because of like learning from Qui-Gon about more cosmic force stuff or whatnot? You know, like maybe there's more than one reason as to why he can do even those things there. And we're just like, it's the force, you know? Yeah. But I don't know the reason why it's the force.
Sure. This is actually the first thing that I've read rather than just kind of like saw on Wikipedia about there being a Sith temple under the Jedi temple.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
It's a common thing from a lot of them, from what I understand of. I guess it's more of conversations I've had with you about like it happens a lot with Jedi temples and Sith temples. They build it on top and you try to take over like there was an evil or whatever here, so we're gonna make it better. Or
because like the dark side can be put into objects for various in various ways and for various purposes, which could be like an object can it can like. What were there were three of them, right? One of them was it can amplify the force, it can nullify the force, and it can like contain like personality and like
that's one
like,
of them
not
too.
Not quite a ghost, but like
because
echo.
that moment there reminded me of like Star Wars: The Old Republic has some of those Sith Lords, like old ancient Sith Lords,
like Marco Ragnos,
like that, and they're like in these like idols or masks or different elements and stuff like, and you go around and like you're not actually talking to the Force ghost, but there's like an element or a memory of them within it. So it does contain some kind of like evil energy or dark energy from those like Sith.
Sure. But I like that Yoda was in there, and I thought that just really cool idea that Jedi like take shit down there because there's this big well of Force energy there, and it's not just Jedi, it's not just light, it's not just dark, and they have that moment where they talk about vergences in the Force, how they can't be created, they can only be discovered, right? And we can bring them down there and we can nullify that type of thing. But it's one of those things where it's like Anakin was a vergence in the Force that was found. He was discovered by Qui-Gon, but then there's theories on like, did Plagueis or Palpatine create him, you know?
Yeah, sure.
And it's another one of those things where it's like, well, who knows? I know that there's canon this and that when it comes to that type of thing, but it's still one of those questions that a lot of people like to talk about. But I do, again, it's that idea of like, well, it's ignorance, right? It's like, well, this never happens, and this is how this feels, so we're not making a mistake, we're saving the galaxy. And they're like, oh, shit, we just let a bunch of like eating trees out, you know, we gotta go take care of that.
We should do something. And the Jedi are like, well, don't worry about whatever's going on there.
Sure,
leave it alone,
fine.
it's fine.
Yeah.
No, it's...
And then fucking Nana's a Nihil.
Yep.
Whenever they were talking about like the 3 streaks or whatever, I was just like, that's cute. It's in her hair.
Yeah.
And then he was like, oh my god, Nan's a Nihil. I was like, huh?
Bum, bum, bum. No, I mean, I do like some of the story beats they do with that, with Wreath and her, and like the kind of relationship that they end up having. Yeah. But then it also comes back in the end where like they're there and she has him, and it's like, you get one chance.
Yeah, she pays him back.
You know, you help me, this is the only one you get. And I like how it's like, she's honorable, but if I ever ran into her again, I don't think she would, let me go. And it's like,
sure,
the Nihil, and I'm glad that it kind of like tied in with that a little bit more at the very end, where it kind of is like you're getting. Chat was saying too. I saw there's confusion between the Marchion versus Markion. Apparently it's Markion, but the audiobooks always say Marchion.
Yeah.
So
Han,
there's a pronunciation thing with Star Wars. So who'd have thought?
It's gonna be really hard for me to change it because I heard these two guys say it 15,000 times. So
Sure.
Marchion Row.
Marchion Row. I don't know, but
Hey, do you think? I was just thinking about this with the idea of like, especially in this talking about like objects that can be inhabited by the dark side and amplify things. Like Roe does have that like crystal ruby thing from the first book where he like brings it out. It's like, I got this red rock, and I remember being like, what's that? Or it's like a rod or a rock. I don't know what it is.
okay. Is that like a Sith artifacty kind of thing or something? You're thinking? Is that like
Maybe.
there's definitely some dark stuff that they're doing. There's the stuff with
Yeah.
the path. There's some secrets they know that no one else really
Yeah.
knows, right? There's that family who has the path knowledge. So
Uh-huh.
like maybe there's other things he has too that's
The
not
Lore Santecas.
yeah, that's not just tied to how we use the path, but maybe it's tied to some other things
But
too.
he has some like weird baggage, it seems like, with the Jedi, with his father and grandmother or whatever. So I just kept thinking, like, I wonder if that's like maybe they're getting into this idol thing to just kind of like plant the seed of like, hey, objects. Maybe he's not a Force user, but maybe he can have this. You know?
Maybe, sure.
So-
And maybe you could have it. I don't know. I know there's like the lizards that stop the Force and stuff from like old legends for like
Salamari, yeah.
yeah, right.
Sure.
So like, could there be other things where it's like, well, if you have this Force object, do you get some kind of immunity, or can you have some kind of Force power that typically you wouldn't, but this object grants that to you, or something, you know?
Gotcha.
Or like holocrons and stuff where they give you like premonitions or visions,
Yeah.
or you kind of see stuff like that. Typically, that's for a Jedi thing, but could you also have that stuff affect someone who maybe isn't a Jedi in some way or something?
I think that would be kind of interesting to, like D&D has that thing where it's like, well, I'm not a magic user, but I got this wand of magic missiles,
Sure.
and I can fire
and
it 3 times.
and I
you
have
know?
this ritual thing and all this
Yeah.
stuff. So maybe if I try really hard, I can
Yeah.
do something with it. Or
I don't know. I think that would be kind of interesting. It kind of reminds me of old EU. The Kyber crystal was a thing that gave you Force power. Wasn't the name of the crystals that are in sabers. So I don't know. That's a thing that I was thinking of, especially when
it could be cool. And like with, High Republic and stuff, like it would be interesting if there's some things that are somehow learned or known about in the High Republic, but it gets lost later on. You know, especially if you have like,
of course,
the dark side, Palpatine. Like, maybe we dive into more story with him at some point, where since we don't really have the Plagueis story and whatnot, like you could kind of alter some things, and he has removed more stuff. You know, like there's different. Camino just being gone. It's like, oh, it doesn't exist. Jedi know everything. It's not there.
Exactly.
You know, and it's like, well,
trust the system.
Is there other things like that where it's like this could have been known, but people forgot about it because it was deleted hundreds of years ago somehow? But I don't know. It could be interesting to mess with that stuff, and then like there's a reason why we don't see that in the later years.
Yeah. There was a couple of things before we get into our discussion about, and maybe we can talk about Comac Vitus when we talk about
the
Jedi. Is the Jedi way the right way? There's a couple other things I wanted to point out that I thought were really cool, especially for the audiobook. At one point, a character literally is talking about "you're not crude matter," and it just played Yoda's theme blatantly. I thought that was really funny. But also, I really enjoyed. At one point, we haven't mentioned Affie much.
Not a whole lot, no.
Affie and the Bind Guild. But there's one point where they're in a hotel, and she's like, "Why is this bed so big?" And her adopted mother is like, well, it's a hotel. Like, it has to be accommodating to every species. So if you have a
Ithorian,
if you have a gigantic
Wookiee.
dude, they got to be able to sit in their bed. So I don't know. It kind of tickled me to think that like Yoda, like in like a big bed,
sure, right?
Like, but he's in the middle and he's like kicking his feet, like,
Like here's Yoda in like a bed for Chewbacca,
Yeah.
right? Because it needs to accommodate as many people as you can.
Yeah.
It makes sense because it's not something I would normally think about. Because like when you go to like a hotel, most humans are typically around the same size.
Yeah.
On average,
Yeah.
you get some people that are a little bit bigger, but those are the outliers. So
Sure.
here you're like, well, there are species, and all of those species are really big, so we need to accommodate for those people
I just
too.
thought that was a fun little world building detail that I never thought of. I mean, I suppose you could, if you wanted to, be like, well, you could get special rooms.
Sure,
but,
these are the big rooms and the little rooms, and then like you put like the little Yoda room next to like the Wookiee or the Tau room, and then that way those make up 2 of the normal size rooms, right?
Sure.
You just kind of put them together.
Yeah.
Like he walks in, he doesn't need a big area, right?
Uh-huh.
Like you just have him walking in and doing that could work.
Yeah. And then there was also another musical moment, and granted, this is only for the audiobook as well, but whenever Affie discovers that her adopted mother, their guild, the Bind Guild, is using indentured servitude, and that was what her parents were. And she was like, she has this moment where she's like, I can wait a really long time, and then I'll be in charge, and then I can free the slaves. Yeah. And then she says, like, but the slaves don't have that long. They can't wait that long. Sure. And they're playing Anakin's theme from Episode 1, confronting slavery. And I thought that was a really good choice. There's a couple times where they'll play music in these, and I'm like, okay.
That's just Star Wars music for the sake of Star Wars music.
Yeah, but you've played that one 11 times already, and it like distracts me a little bit more than it, except when the Nihil come in. That shit rocks. It's so good.
I wouldn't mind in some of the situations, and I think we talked about this with like Andor, but like in some of these, especially with High Republic, I kind of wish like I don't know how much effort they put into these. I'm sure there's a lot of effort being done to it, but like. Should the High Republic have some of its own themes, you know? And I think if we did like...
That's the Nihil theme.
If we did TV show stuff, they definitely would.
I agree.
But there's some moments where it's like, well, this is, this is a, Yoda theme or a Leia theme or, whatever the themes may be. And you put these into these moments and stuff. It's like, I kind of wish, maybe they had their own Jedi theme for this moment or their own this or that rather than me trying to... I'm kind of taken back to these moments.
Yeah, because I mean, I've seen Star Wars so much, I can instantly be like, they're doing Anakin's theme. But at least in that moment, it was like that one's appropriate.
Yeah,
sometimes
I like the ones that are
appropriate.
Yeah, sometimes that's just Star Wars music to be Star Wars music in this time. So, but it would be cool to have some like, I think is Nihil the only like new theme kind of thing? I'm trying to remember.
There's also
like
kind of
one.
that like beginning chapter music where I guess I don't know what it sounds like, but it sounds like. Looking into space, it's like I don't remember that from any Star Wars.
I think I think that might be something they do in a lot of other chapter books too for some of the audio stuff. Okay. I think Ahsoka's book does that kind of stuff too. It's like chapter 2.
I wouldn't know.
It's like boom. Yeah. Like it kind of has like a little
Gotcha.
So I think that's also just kind of it might be new, but it's kind of common at least for that. But that's also for like all the Star Wars books. So I do like the idea of at least making. Well, we're gonna have some Star Wars books. We're gonna need some themes for a few new characters or this or that, and just let's make some new things for that.
Sure,
but
I'm sure that
I don't know how much money's there and how much they want to spend on it and whatever else.
Right?
So.
I mean, you could waste a lot of money and just hire different voice actors to play all the characters if you wanted to.
Sure,
but maybe that would be a little distracting in terms of like literally having like Corey Burton do a Dooku line and then have someone be like, "He said,"
sure,
So though, I get you.
I do like. I don't know about the Dooku. Someone said too that it's on a there's a script version of it, but it is an audio.
Cool. All right.
But I don't know who does that one. But like the Ahsoka book is done by Ashley Eckstein.
That's cool. Yeah.
Doing stuff like that, I think is really cool. And I don't know about the Leia books or who does those or anything. But there are some of these people that are doing these audio books, and I think they do a really good job. Like they change their voices so many times. There's a few times where I'm like, that one doesn't work for me. But I
feel like
when you're doing 20 voices,
I know. I cannot begrudge the man because he already has a very, very good voice on his own. But a lot of his female characters all sound the same. They sound the same to me, and it was like a little hard to take. Like I was like, how old is Nan and how old is Affy? Because they sounded real young, but then I'm like, oh no, I think they're a little older than that. So that's my only real problem with it. But his Cormac and all these other characters were so good.
Dude, it was who was it? It wasn't Cormac. I think it was Dez. Dez, was Dez because of his voice? I kept picturing like Lalo or something like that.
Really?
Like the guy who was in Hawkeye and that kind of stuff. Like that guy. I was like, I would like him to be this guy. That could look cool.
I kept picturing him as a Twi'lek for some reason. I think it's because of his accent.
Sure.
He had the accent and.
Was it Frenchy? Is that like it was like a Frenchish accent?
Yeah, French. You don't have to say Frenchy.
Well, like.
Is it Frenchy?
Like, by that, I mean, like. I'm making an adjective, I guess, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
Like.
It's not super French, but it has like the.
Frenchish?
It's like they come from France, but they haven't been there for 20 years. That what you mean?
Yeah, I suppose. I guess I didn't get like a French accent from it. I was trying to think of like, what does this really sound like? And then I kept going to like Lalo, but in Hawkeye more so, when he's just kind of being kind of a little suave-ish and stuff. But I don't know what accent he has in that moment either. So, I have two other things. I thought one, I don't hear this mentioned very often. I thought it was cool that they dropped Christophersus.
Yeah, they did.
And I was like, oh, cool, Christophersus.
That was cool.
I think it was Reith talking about it. He named Santuine or something like that. I don't know, one of those Tatooines that I've.
That's where Dez was or whatever. He was on a mission to Zantuin or
Yeah,
something.
like I'm not familiar with that one. There's a lot of Tuine places and stuff, but I thought Christophsis. I'm like, oh, I know Christophsis. Sweet. Okay, I don't ever hear about that except for that Clone Wars movie and a couple of those episodes. And the other thing that we haven't talked about either, but like I thought the use of the AT droids. Is that what they were? AT.
8T.
8T.
Yeah.
I thought the use of them was interesting.
Yeah,
Because at
they
first
were
I'm like,
funny.
here's some problem we have that we have to solve. How do we get past these droids and stuff? And I was like, okay, well, they just burn some trees and they go take care of that. But then them coming back later on when they're fighting the Drengir and being like, oh, their job is to protect these plants and stuff. But those guys are plants. But we're attacking them and they're not attacking us. Yeah. So knock that shit down, make them attack the vines, and then it at least buys us time. And I was like, cool. I like that it came back around. I thought there were some interesting, like having droids be in Star Wars is really cool. And I like finding different, interesting, new uses of these droids sometimes,
Me
right?
too.
So.
Yeah, that was a really fun moment. And also when they were returning to Coruscant and they find that one frigate that's on fire and they all are doing a different thing and Reith goes and he finds this little like female Wookiee baby.
Yeah.
And it's like on his back and like, trying to save it and it rips out his Padawan brain and eats it. And he goes, hang on, Wookiee baby.
Hang on, Wookiee baby.
Hang on, Wookiee baby. I thought that was really funny.
There's a lot of moments too, because like in the very beginning, everyone's like all scattered and stuff too. But I like that they help them because of the solar flare happening, right? Which was interesting, and they didn't come back later on. But the thing I did like is when they returned and stuff, and there's like another Nihil ship and everything. I like them like attaching to like an asteroid or whatever it was, right? And like orbiting around the planet.
Yeah, and like shielding it.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And
well,
like
we'll put on the brakes.
Yeah, it just I liked his. I don't know, getting little moments here of like Leox gets to shine, and Reith gets to shine, and like everyone gets a little moment to shine, and that was one of the moments I'm like, I'm glad that Leox gets a cool little moment, because then he's like kind of chilling inside, waiting, and then he comes in later on and just kind of gets people out. But
Nexus said that since we were talking about it earlier, that Leox is officially based on Matthew McConaughey.
Matthew McConaughey?
Yeah, so I could see that.
I could see that too. Yeah. I mean, I could like the voice of him. Could kind of maybe mix in with a little Matthew McConaughey, but like he's not in Star Wars anywhere, so maybe that could work. Sometimes I need to picture someone, right?
I was about ready to say no, he's gonna be, but that's Jude Law.
Yeah, right.
Never mind.
I know that there's a lot of art and stuff, and I do appreciate Nexus usually. He helps us. One, we talk with him too about like, well, what are some things we should do where we're not getting like super spoiled by whatever. And it's tricky because we're behind on a lot of books, and I want to read all of them at some point, or listen to them or whatever. But he helps to try to be like, well, maybe you should make sure you get to these before you get to that, which is cool. But he also is like, here's some pictures of stuff.
Yeah, he'll spoiler mark it so that we have to wait until like, okay, so what's his person look like, and we can look at the name and be like, oh, okay. As I was reading, I always try to look at that, but I think I got like halfway through the book like pretty quickly actually, and there was a point where I'm like, what does Geo look like? And I clicked it, and I was like, I don't know what I expected.
What else did you expect?
He's a rock,
a big giant rock. It's like,
but he has soul.
It's like Han and Carbonite, but without the Han.
Is there like a? I mean, I know they have like official art, but is there like an art of book for High Republic? That would be cool.
Not that I know of, but there might be.
I would like just do what like the Visionaries did.
Nexus says there will be soon.
Oh, really? Okay.
So that could be cool. We need to get through more of the High Republic though before we dive into that and get spoiled or anything. So.
Okay.